have a plan to go to west. It's the highway, it's the highway, that's the best. Get your kicks on Route 66.
Alright, time for another edition of We Get Our Kicks Reading Book 66, Kennedy Elementary School Summer Reading Challenge, where I bring you a different book, award-winning book, like this Caldecott Award winner, Extra Yarn by Mac Barnett, and it is inspired by a different location in and around Barrow County. So today I'm outside the Michael's Arts and Crafts store in the Barrow Crossing Shopping Center. Great place to get yarn or any kind of your craft stuff, new teacher supplies, as well for the school year coming up. And it inspired the reading of the book Extra Yarn by Mac Barnett, illustrated by John Clausen. So as I read this book, I'm going to make sure that I try to model what good readers do, which is read the words correctly and read them at a good pace, not too fast, not too slow, and make sure I read with expression. And as you guys are listening, do what good readers do, and that's listen for the story elements, the character, who or what the story is about, the setting, where and when the story takes place, and also the sequence of events. So you can see what happens first and next and last. So this is a book about a girl who has an extra supply of yarn that never ever runs out, and what she does with this when an evil Archduke decides he wants to the yarn for himself. So it's a great book, Extra Yarn by Mac Barnett, inspired by Michael's Arts and Crafts store in Barrow Crossing. You guys have a great day. Extra Yarn by Mac Barnett, illustrated by John Clausen. On a cold afternoon in a cold little town where everywhere you looked was either the white of snow or the black of soot from the chimneys, Annabelle found a box filled with yarn of every color. So she went home and knit herself a sweater. And when Annabelle was done, she had some extra yarn. So she knit a sweater for Mars too. But there was still extra yarn. And when Annabelle and Mars went for a walk, Nate pointed and laughed and said, "You two look ridiculous." "You're just jealous," said Annabelle. "No, I'm not," said Nate. But it turned out he was. And even after she made a sweater for Nate and his dog, and for herself and for Mars, she still had extra yarn. At school, Annabelle's classmates could not stop talking about her sweater. "Quiet!" shouted Mr. Norman. "Quiet, everyone! Annabelle, that sweater of yours is a terrible distraction. I cannot teach with everyone turning to look at you." "Then I'll knit one for everyone," Annabelle said, "so they won't have to turn around." "Impossible," said Mr. Norman. "You can't." But it turned out she could, and she did, even for Mr. Norman. And when she was done, Annabelle still had extra yarn. So she knit sweaters for her mom and dad, and for Mr. Pendleton and Mrs. Pendleton, and for Dr. Palmer and for little Louis. She made sweaters for everyone except Mr. Crabtree, who never wore sweaters or even long pants, and who would stand in his shorts with the snow up to his knees. "No sweater for me, thanks," said Mr. Crabtree. So she made Mr. Crabtree a hat. And even then, Annabelle still had extra yarn. She made sweaters for all the dogs and all the cats and for all the other animals too. Soon people thought Annabelle would run out of yarn, but it turned out she didn't. So Annabelle made sweaters for things that didn't even need sweaters. Things began to change in that little town. News spread of this remarkable girl who never ran out of yarn, and people came to visit from all around the world to see all the sweaters and to shake Annabelle's hand. One day an archduke who was very fond of clothes sailed across the sea and demanded to see Annabelle. "Little girl," said Archduke, "I would like to buy that miraculous box of yarn, and I'm willing to offer you $1,000,000. "No, thank you," said Annabelle, who was knitting a sweater for a pickup truck. The Archduke's mustache twitched. "2,000,000? he said. "No, thanks," Annabelle said, shaking her head. "10,000,000? shouted the Archduke. "Take it or leave it." "Leave it," said Annabelle. "I won't sell the yarn." And she didn't. So that night, Archduke hired 3 robbers to break into Annabelle's house, and they stole the box. And took it to the Archduke, who set off across the snow and sailed over the sea. The Archduke put on his favorite song and sat in his best chair. Then he took out the box, and he lifted its lid, and he looked inside. His mustache quivered. It shivered. It trembled. The Archduke hurled the box out the window and shouted, "Little girl, I curse you with my family's curse! You will never be happy again." But what happened? It turned out she was. That was Extra Yarn by Mac Barnett, illustrated by John Clausen.
With you.